Well, my name is Nigel Todd. I'm involved with the Cooperative College as the Vice Chair of its Board of Governors, but I'm also a City Councillor in a city called Newcastle upon Tyne in North East England. To come and meet you today to describe a new cooperative development in the United Kingdom called cooperative councils. And this is really about how we try to change the way local government works in the country to deliver public services in a different way. And in the United Kingdom, many of our public services are delivered through local councils. See, the health service and the police are outside of that, but things like environment, street cleaning, housing, some aspects of education, social services, a vast number of things, parks, leisure services come through a local council. And with cooperative councils, we're trying to look at a different way of delivering those. I've provided a briefing note on local government in the United Kingdom, so that's something you can take away and read. Local government in England is very complex and complicated. It's grown up in strange ways over many years, so it's not all that straightforward, but I won't go into the details of that, but if you went to Scotland and Wales, it's much more straightforward. But there's some background on that note, just to take away. And there are two reasons why local government in Britain is looking at a cooperative approach. One is because of financial pressures, and another is because local councils are sometimes very remote bureaucracies, and they do things to people rather than with people, and that isn't always the best way to deliver services. First, the financial problem. Local government in England is subject to a lot of public spending cuts. That is, most of its money comes from the national government. And the national government has decided that one way through the crisis caused by the banking system is to cut public spending. And that means a lot of the cuts will fall on local government services. So over the past few years, and really up into this time next year, local government will lose about 1/3, 30% of its funding. And then beyond next year, the cuts get even deeper. So local government services are becoming very difficult to maintain. And the other problem that local government faces is that it's sometimes not very democratic. Every local council is overseen by councillors who people elect either every year or every 3 years. So there's democracy in that sense. But there's often a culture in local government of really doing things to people, knowing what's best for people, bureaucrats knowing what's best for people, and perhaps telling people what to do. And that means a lot of local government can appear to be very remote from the things that people want to happen in their areas. And in the context of trying to save local government services from closure or being put out to private companies in order to deal with the financial problem, some of us are arguing that if we looked at local government services becoming cooperatives, that might be a way of saving those services and bringing them closer to people. councils that are interested in the cooperative option have formed a network, the Cooperative Councils Innovation Network, and so far 22 councils in England, Wales and Scotland have come together in that network to share ideas and to advocate the wider use of cooperatives. So some of those councils are among the largest cities in Britain, so Glasgow, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Newcastle, Liverpool and some London borough councils as well. So that's a new force in local government, small in number, but it covers really quite a big part of the British population. So a cooperative council would do two things to try to save local services and improve them in this difficult financial climate. One thing would be to try to work differently with people in the council's area, so rather than talking at them and telling them what to do, we'd try to work with them. And the other thing that a cooperative council would do would be to look at whether there are cooperative models for putting local services on a different financial and customer basis. So the first thing is to work differently as a council. I've got perhaps part of a short film that a cooperative council has made that might give you a sense of that working differently.
I think the Co-op Council is about removing the kind of bureaucracy and the closedness of the town hall and actually going out into the community, working with the community, and I think the word with is very important in that, working with the community and bringing together local ward councillors as well, so that you've got a really powerful different alliance between councillors, community and officers, all working together to find solutions to local problems.
The idea was really around looking at the skills of people who live on the Tulse Hill estate and looking at how we could develop opportunity for people to share those skills with each other, to learn from each other, and really to work together in terms of community building.
The aim of the project was to get my bike, a barbecue and a trailer and go to all different parts of my local community and give people free food, to talk to them about being unemployed or getting them into any further training. I got them to fill out forms and they filled out forms about being unemployed in the local area. I went back to High Trees where I was doing voluntary work, and the unemployment officer there, she would phone every single person that filled out a form.
Lambeth Poly is a project that in the long term aims to develop capacity in the borough for it to feed itself. So that capacity is in terms of creating a cohort of farmers who are trained to grow under plastic and know enough about plant science. The idea was to have a simple design whereby volunteers can understand the system and look after it themselves once they've had the training.
Everyone kind of felt, you know what, it would be really good if we could tackle some of the speeding traffic and the volume of traffic, because there's a lot of rat running that goes on down here. And just the atmosphere and the environment in a street could return back to how it probably was 10, 20 years ago. So we wanted to start to put kind of big planters or something in the road. Well, if you put barriers in the road visually, you stop the racetrack mentality of cars coming down.
All of these projects, I think, were cracking examples of going out, finding inspiration in the local community, building on the creativity to find really cross-cutting, effective solutions and things that you would never actually have thought about if you were trying to design a solution from the town hall.
I think what we were looking for was some practical examples of how the council could work together with its partners and community organisations and individuals to demonstrate that we could work together on a very micro scale, so focusing on Herne Hill and Tulse Hill, and I suppose providing practical examples of co-production in action that could really deliver real change and demonstrate that working together cooperatively we could deliver more than if the council did it on its own.
We were working with community members from Tulse Hill, Herne Hill and people from Lambeth Council, and we use a diagonal slice, or a diagonal dozen as we call it. So we have essentially 12 movers and shakers from the community, and Lambeth Council are going to be the core project team. We have a methodology where we prioritise the projects in 30-day, 60-day and 90-day sections. So the longest project, we hope, will take 90 days, which is really, really good, and some of them are much, much quicker.
I think what we've learned is the ones that have been most successful in taking forward are the ones that had really strong leadership, whether that was somebody in the council really wanting to take it forward or somebody within the community or one of our partner organisations. It's not enough for us to purely deliver services or for us to provide particular funding streams to enable people to deliver what they want. We recognise that actually we need to be a facilitator and an enabler, and we need to provide support to people within our communities, whether they're statutory partners or community groups or individuals who want to kind of get something delivered.
Imposing a change is very tough, but if you can slowly evolve, even if it's just small results all the time, then it would have been worthwhile.
The aim is eventually to have more of these polytunnels around the borough, and they could be on public housing sites as the one at Tulse Hill Estate is.
So the idea from the beginning was that we're gonna leave this in our hands of tenants on the estate. And yeah, I would absolutely love to do this. Yeah.
From working with Lambeth Council, Design Council and High Trees, I've been able to further my careers and expand my skills in youth work, and they've opened a few different doors that I've been moving on to by working with them.
As people begin to share together, to learn together, they become more confident, their self-esteem becomes stronger, and they become less reliant on other people and on other organisations and maybe on the council to provide services which they realise they can provide themselves.
I obviously lived on the estate for a while and really want to see the estate flourish, and the way that I believe it's going to flourish is for local people to get involved.
It's actually putting into practice, I think, some of the values that we've articulated through the Co-op Council. It really is very demonstrably going out to the community, working with them, giving them some support to generate ideas that they think would be inspiring, innovative and effective in their local area.
Maybe the sense of that is about the council trying to do things differently. So going out of the town hall, out of the council offices, and talking to people in communities. And key words used in there were enabler and facilitator. So the council also then sees its role as helping other people to make things happen in their communities, realising the council can't do it all. And all that might sound obvious to us being involved in cooperatives, but for within local government structures, it's not always what happens. So there has to be then a big cultural change within the council organisation to enable it to treat people with respect and go out and meet and work with people. The second thing that a cooperative council would try to do is look to find cooperative models for keeping its services that are under financial threat, but to keep them within community ownership and community control, rather than selling them off to private companies or just closing them down. So there are a number of examples around the country of where councils have tried cooperative approaches. A very important change that cooperative councils are trying to achieve is to make sure that cooperatives can bid for council contracts. So if the council is looking to provide a service to manage public parks or care for elderly people, then it's important that if a cooperative has been set up to provide that, offer that service, that it's considered on an equal basis with private companies. We think we've found a way under English local government and commercial law for that to happen. And that would make a very big difference for cooperatives, because they often found it very difficult to get into public sector contracts. So there's a list there of some of the things that councils have become interested in doing within housing, social services, schools and education, economic development and so on. And one example I thought I would just give you a little bit of information about is something that's happening in my council in Newcastle around a community environmental project. In part of Newcastle, an area called Wingrove, residents and local councillors like me came together to look at how we could help people grow more food, save money on their home energy bills, their gas and electricity, and also reduce litter and waste through recycling. So it's a different way of living within that area. And the City Council has been supporting that project in a number of ways. So it's lent to some support from council officers for particular items, and it's provided us with a little bit of money to start up the project. And the council is also supporting the residents' community cooperative. We set up the residents set up a community cooperative to really to improve services within the area. So we're working with the council on a plan to for the cooperative to manage the local park, which is an important green space, to provide council services for things like street cleaning, refuse collection, in a way that works better in the local area. We have a very ethnically diverse area, and so we want to do things that will bring people together to understand each other more. And we're also interested in looking at how the cooperative can create an income to make itself sustainable over time, because all cooperatives have to be really able to generate enough income to cover their costs. There are some problems. We're at a very, very early stage with cooperative councils, so there are some big questions we have to tackle. It's not clear that all councils could change the way they think and deal with people. They have mindsets that are often very rigid, so it's a cultural challenge to councils. Very few of our public services were designed to be cooperatives, so there's a challenge in how well the cooperative model will fit into some of those services. And trade unions have some significant concerns about whether the cooperative model is simply another way of privatising services, and also whether it's a way of getting out of nationally agreed salary and working conditions agreements that public sector service staff have. So we're working on all those problems to try to solve each of them. That's it, really. The Cooperative Councils Network has a website with lots of case studies on it, and so if you're interested, do have a look into the website every so often, and you'll find an update on what's going on and who's doing what. But thank you for listening so patiently, and if I can answer any questions, I'll do my best.
The question is when, for example, each council, including Newcastle Council, for example, Newcastle Council decide to adopt this kind of approach as a main approach. He's wondering how many councillors agreed to adopt this approach, and how this idea started, and how easy or difficult were all other councillors agreed to apply this approach.
Just in Newcastle? Or
yeah, they say both, maybe Newcastle and on average other councils.
Yes. Let's try to think now. The idea came largely from a political party called the Cooperative Party, which is aligned with the Labour Party in Britain, but also from a realisation among councillors that we couldn't go on in the same old ways, because if we did, in the context of the financial pressures, we would have no public services left in a few years' time. Many of them would have been closed or sold off. So the political, I suppose, genesis of all this was really from a political source, the Cooperative Party, and from councillors associated with the Cooperative Party. What was the other part of the question?
So then, the first was how was started, as you just answered, and the second question was because the council must have different councillors from different parties. They must have different opinions. How easy or how difficult to get agreed to adopt this new approach? How do we become a consensus to start this approach?
Well,
that's an astute question.
It's an astute question, and
just be honest.
Yes, there's no easy answer except that the present coalition government in Britain includes people who are interested in cooperatives. Though not always for the reasons that we're interested in cooperatives, but they're willing to experiment with the idea. So for the Liberal Democrat and Conservative parties, there are people in them who are interested in cooperatives, and it does mean the government then opens some doors for things to happen. The Labour Party is much more largely supportive of cooperatives, but it's still pretty much a new idea for a lot of Labour people. All the councils that have sought to become cooperative councils are Labour-controlled councils. But the Cooperative Councils network is open to any council, no matter what its political allegiance, so long as they can demonstrate that they're serious about a cooperative model. And there will be issues. And one of the issues, I think, might be about whether the cooperative model is a way of reducing salaries, reducing working conditions, or simply setting up another form of privatisation. So moving a council service to something that pretends to be a cooperative, but really it's somebody's private company. So I would think locally around the country you'll have those arguments about it. But at the moment I suppose the answer is that there's a weak political consensus in favour of cooperatives. Not very strong, but it wasn't there a few years ago, so people are trying to think differently.
Coming out from financial pressure on the council, local council, that problem may be probably coming out from global economic problem. Yeah. So then the people come back to see start to look at the models, but then that sounds like it's kind of a temporary solution. So what she meant is the root cause coming out from the current capitalism model, neoliberal model, market model. So we have to work on to fix the problem instead of choose the third model, if you like. So in fact, if councillors and councils are elected by people, they are representative of people. If you don't trust them, therefore, if you start giving power too much to co-op model, that sounds like that can against some original principle of democracy. So that's the hard question.
Yes.
반정치의 부분 결과되지 않을까? 예전에
So,
야경 국가처럼 국가 역할을.
her concern is people then not really trusting councillors and election and voting enough, you know.
Yes.
Good point.
Well, they don't.
Yeah.
No, there's very little interest in local democracy in Britain. So if you have an election for a local council, you're very lucky if you get more than 30% of the electorate to come out to vote. It's not always clear for the reasons for that, but that's what we're stuck with. So not a lot of people vote. Councils aren't always popular because of sometimes the high-handed way in which they've worked. They have a reputation for wasting money. They're easy targets to hit. And one reason why the present government chose to cut public spending through local councils was because they knew local councils were unpopular, so the councils would get blamed when the cuts in services were made. So local government is in a weak position. It also can't defy the government. It can't. When the government says cut the services, it has to cut them. If local councillors on the council, like Newcastle or Manchester, said, no, we're not going to cut our services, well, they would be removed and a council officer would be put in charge, or a government commissioner. So councils are quite politically weak in that sense. The attraction of cooperatives is that most of them, in a local government context, would be made up of people who live locally and work locally. So you're keeping those public sector assets all those assets, the houses, the schools, the parks, which were built up by public money, you're keeping that in the hands of people in the local communities, and rather than selling it off to, say, a private company or just closing it down. So providing cooperatives are run well, then the management of those services could become more democratic and closer to what people want. And so that changes everything if that happens.
How workers work for the council, for example, and that they were the member of a trade union in the council, and then he has to change his job from council to some community co-op, that kind of case. She concerned whether this person still will have a will or power to people get together and join the trade union together. So she's asking whether people, when become interested in co-op model, maybe they become less interested in their trade union or labor issues and so on. Whether they weaken workers to understand their right and the power to fight for their own workers' right. Yeah.
Could I answer that as well after you?
We're very keen to work with the trade unions to support trade union membership and the rights of unions to organise and be part of any cooperative. And certainly for the Cooperative College and for other cooperative organisations, that's a key principle. We wouldn't want council workers to suffer if they move from working for the council to working for a cooperative. And there's some legislation that will protect them on that. But the presence and partnership with trade unions is very important there. And as an example of that, we have a growing number of cooperative schools that have become cooperatives of one kind or another. The cooperative schools have collectively signed a partnership agreement with several of the education sector unions, unions for teachers and unions for administrative and other staff, cleaning staff in schools. And so the principles that have been set out there in those quite pioneering agreements respect the rights of trade unions, and they respect national terms and conditions and salary grades. And that is gradually setting them apart from schools which have gone in a different direction and which are free to set their own salary rates and their own terms and conditions, which are usually worse. So what we want is a cooperative sector that is in partnership with the unions and is recognising all the things that unions stand for in the workplace.